Good afternoon, everyone, and a really warm welcome to the first of live events of the series of our Anything in Print programmes. My name's Tim Carter, and I'm responsible for the commercial print division within Ricoh. And I'm really pleased today to be joined by my colleague from our European headquarters, Mark Hinder, who's a member of our wider global team and is responsible for driving some really exciting business development programmes, some of which we'll present to you today. We've also got a really special guest, Andy Martiniello from Strategyzer, the company behind the value proposition and business model canvas, which is now used by over 5 million people around the world. So, Mark, Andy, good afternoon or good morning in your instance, Andy, and welcome to you on this session.
Thanks, Tim.
If you've got any questions during this webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A engagement tool. We will try to answer as many of these as we can during the webcast, but if a fuller answer is needed or we run out of time, then it will be answered later via email. Also, I think it's important to state that an on-demand version of today's recording will be sent to you after the event, and additional help materials are also available in the handout section. So please feel free to explore further. I'm sure you'll find this session really informative. A lot of our customers are already taking advantage of this program that we'll present to you today. And if at the end of the session you feel that Edge is what your business needs right now, then let us know. Because for those who do, we're going to be giving away 5 consultancy packages, each worth £3,500. And we'll be providing those to you without any additional costs. So please stay tuned and enjoy. But before we dive into the workshop session itself, I'd like to go back to the launch of our Business Booster program back in July. Back then, it was a key milestone for both Ricoh, the market, and our customers, as we began to provide our customers with a value-added business development platform, which is designed to provide the relevant tools and resources and support to accelerate and expand their businesses. So Mark, please tell us how this initiative is performing so far, and what feedback have we already got from our customers, and what is Edge?
Thanks, Tim. That's great. And it's really nice to be here this afternoon. About a year ago, obviously the trading climate for all of us changed, and the pandemic has really, affected the way that we do business. At that time, we were developing Edge as an approach, but we accelerated what we were doing under the development of that. And I'm really pleased for Andy and Strategyzer to partner with us, which will obviously be a strong part of the Edge services. What we've been doing for the last year across Europe and also in North America is testing the approach that we've been developing to ensure that not only is it relevant, but it can fully support the customers' businesses. And I'm pleased to report back that not only have we done that, but we've also helped customers of ours move into new markets, new business models, where perhaps they've never even thought of going into things like direct-to-garment printing. We've got commercial printers that are moving into that area where where they would probably have never played before. So let me quickly go through Edge. So Beata, if you don't mind, the next slide. Let me go through what, why, and how. What is it really? It is a business development program aimed at our commercial print and industrial print customers. What it does is effectively allow you to harness, the technology and the investments that you've done, but in a methodical way. So what Andy's going to be talking about later on is how you can explore and exploit. So I don't want to really go into his element to yet and give the game away, but that really is a strong part of what we do. And what we've done is really develop our unique set of tools, and you're going to see one of those tool sets this afternoon, which is the partnership that we have with Strategyzer. And then there's a whole load of other modules from sales training, marketing training, that we've got behind this that then can support the whole business. So next slide, please, Beata. And when I say the whole business, Edge really is targeted at every individual in that company. So from the managing director to the board level, right the way down to salespeople, marketing individuals, and clearly the production area. And we've developed the tools and the program to reach out to every single part of the print business to help you to develop and grow. Next slide, please, Pete. So Edge is more than just an experience. We're going to see in a minute that we use the term discover and discovery a lot, and that really forms a big part of what we do. And ultimately, Edge is there and designed to grow and elevate your business and your performance, because we know right now you're desperate in some instances to find new opportunities that are out there in the market, but the key element is managing cash flow and the return to the bottom line. Next slide, please. So the process, let me go into it. The first part is what we call a discovery workshop, and it is exactly that. We'll sit down with you, we'll sit down with your teams, and we'll discover each other. You know, we'll discover what parts of the business could be exploited, and how we can actually take ideas and move them into logical business models. Then we move into the pre-investment phase. So what we'll come back with is a plan which identifies exactly what's needed and when it's needed. Subject to your agreement, then we move into the post-investment phase, the delivery of the services and all of the modules that we would have agreed up front. Next slide, please. So let me go into a bit more detail about how the process works. And this is a 5-step process, and we start at the discovery stage. So next slide, please, Beata. So here, as I mentioned, this is where we're sitting down. So we're going to run a few sessions with you to understand exactly what your objectives and your key priorities are, and then put together a process and a plan that can work with you to take those ideas and capture them into business models, as I said. But it's not only just about the business model. We're looking at salespeople. We're looking at their ability to move from farmer to hunter. We're looking at your marketing efforts, what you're doing, what's working well, what perhaps could be improved. And we do that in a very methodical way. The next stage then, which is the stage 2, which we're going to go to now, slide please, is really where we're putting this in a way which makes sense. So we're putting a plan together for you, which is analyzing exactly every part of your business. So we'll look at what costs you've currently got, what areas of improvement we could make, and put that into realistically a report back to you. In stage number 3, we then put together our plan, what we think could be optimized and what could be delivered against. And you're going to see elements of that today with the presentation from Andy. Stage 4 is where we clearly deliver against it. And what we're doing then is our teams will come on site and we'll sit with you over a number of sessions and actually deliver back what we agreed in the plan. And then the key element then is stage number 5, which we're going to go to now. And in stage number 5, it's a continual process. So we're re-evaluating what's going on. We're making sure that what we put together in our plan is being effective. And most importantly, you're seeing a return on the business that you thought that you were going to get. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause on this bit and introduce Andy and share with you now exactly the tools and the process that we go through. So Andy, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then I will hand over control to you now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. And thank you all for having me today. My name is Andy Martiniello. I am the head of growth with Strategyzer. I'm based in Toronto in Canada. So yes, good morning. I think likely good afternoon for most of you. Again, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here with you folks, talking a little bit about innovation, talking about the tools for innovation, and then fundamentally ways in which we augment that process going from early stage ideas. Mark talked a lot about the ideation phase, and then moving into creating something that adds value for your organization, right? So at the end of all of it, that's what this is really about. And I think that the areas that we're really going to square well with, as Mark went through those 5 steps, will be the discover and analyze phases. I think that's really where we live. But let me get into talking about some of the details here. I'm going to start with a quick statistic, and that's that 70% of senior executives state that they think that innovation is an important part of their strategy. I mean, this is a bit of a no-brainer. When I see this statistic, I kind of think, what happened to the other 30%? I mean, who doesn't think that innovation is an important part of the strategy? The real crux of this statistic comes into the next follow-on point, which is that the actual return that senior leaders and business owners like yourself are actually seeing in the work of their innovation process is very low. So when it comes to really understanding and executing on their ecosystem for innovation, they're just not getting the return that they are hoping for, or that they have thought would be part of this process. And it really results in this leadership challenge. What do we do from here? How do we really access this belief and this knowledge that we have that innovation is critically important? We want to innovate, but how do we do it without jeopardizing our own business? And what is the path for that? And so we've got 4 key concepts that we really like to position to answer and address some of that quandary. And it starts with, as Mark mentioned, it's okay, you didn't steal any of the fire, because we talk about explore and exploit all the time, because it is so fundamental to all of the concepts that we really bring forward. It starts here. It's finding that balance between continuing to exploit your existing business model. So we're not turning away from how we got to where we are today, of course. And in fact, we really want to find ways to be innovative in making that even better. So how do we iterate on that and create more strength in our existing business model? And then at the same time, how do we explore for net new? So Alex Osterwalder and the team, of course, who created Strategyzer, created all of the tools that I'm going to be showing you today, has gone out over the many years and talked to hundreds of organizations, and he has found that the ones that are the most resilient, the ones that Alex likes to call the invincible company, which of course is the title of his most recent book, they're the ones that really figure this out. How do you continue to explore for net new ideas while you're doing well? Don't wait for a crisis, because then it might be a little bit too late. So it begins here. So what does it look like? Well, of course, when we're talking about explore in the on the explore side, we're talking about new ideas. We're talking about searching for new ideas and really leaning into innovation, such as it is. And of course, we're also believers that innovation runs all the way across this continuum. But here in the early stages is typically what we classify innovation. We also know that the process of going from early stage idea all the way through to an actual core business model, something that becomes part of our business, is a messy process, right? So lots of failure and stepping forward and stepping back, as I'm sure many of you have experienced over the years. Of course, I'm speaking to a room full of entrepreneurs. And so you understand this process, as do we. And so this is where this explore exploit continuum is so critically important, to move from that one stage to the next. So it begins there. And again, innovation lives all the way across that continuum, which leads me to the second point, and that's that there are 3 types of innovation. There's people tend to say innovation is has to be something brand new. Well, there's 3 types. There's efficiency innovation, there's sustaining innovation, and then there's transformative innovation. And each one has a tremendous amount of relevance. And I want to bring in an example just to help illustrate. So Amazon, an example of efficiency innovation at Amazon is the automation of the warehouses. So nothing changed in their business model, right? They're online retailers, nothing changed. But what they did is have an enormous impact, of course, on their own bottom line through this automation process, but then also in the customer experience. So it is a critical part of their business model, which is how are they bringing value to their customer segment. So they changed that by automating this, and as a result, increasing or decreasing turnaround time, and of course errors and so on. So the customer experience got better, right? So that's an example of efficiency innovation. Here's an example that Rico, Mark, you guys are part of this, right? The Amazon locker. So it's adjacent to the core business model, right? It doesn't change the business model, but it's a different way because they had a way of shipping, and now this element brought something that again was part of their core business model, but is helping to sustain it and keep it alive in the face of competition. And then of course, a very well-known example of transformative innovation in Amazon is Amazon Web Services. Completely revamped, right? So totally different business model, changed their organization, right? Became, this is of course now where they make the majority of their revenue, and so it was really a game changer. So again, 3 types of innovation, so critically important to keep in mind. The third concept is that you need a funnel of ideas, not a tunnel, not one idea that we kind of grab a hold of and just stick with, right? Can't fall in love with your first idea. Alex talks a lot about that as one of his core things. And you can't just take on that sort of this is my baby type of approach, because there's a lot of danger in that. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about risk and de-risk and the cost of risk in a minute, but it really is important to start with this funnel approach, lots of ideas that we then take into a process of discovery. And Mark, you talked about discovery as being fundamental to this, and it is. It's in the beginning. We have lots of ideas, and then we want to walk those ideas through a process where we determine how do we make really good decisions about these ideas. When do we know that we should persevere or change or perhaps retire an idea? And we do say retire often instead of kill, because not only because it sounds a little bit nicer, but also because sometimes you do need to just put an idea on a shelf. It's just not the right time, but it might come back to life later. So all of that process goes through this, as opposed to just jumping from, hey, we have an idea and let's just go after it, right? So that's the importance of having multiple ideas. And this whole process is designed so that, going back to my opening statement, it's all about taking an idea and turning it into a functioning business model that is scalable and will create some return. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about, of course, right? That's why we're here, and that's what this conversation is leading us to. So let me show you another example, and this is detailed from data that we've gotten both through VCs and our own customers. We've gone out to some of our large-scale customers and got some insight in terms of what does this look like. And so if we look at the actual portfolio map, we see that in the bottom left corner, here's where our expected return is very low. Our innovation risk is really high, right? So this is the danger zone. Here's why we need so many ideas, because it's pretty fraught in that space. So let's say that we have 10 ideas. Well, the statistics show us that if we take those ideas and walk them through a testing process, really assessing those ideas, not just through our own opinions, but looking for evidence to see whether or not those ideas are viable, statistics show us that we'll get 70% failure, which is a great thing, right? Because now in this example, those are 7 ideas that we're no longer going to be spending our time and resources on trying to explore and invest in. We know we should put them away. And now we're focusing on the 3 that are left. And again, statistics will show us that of those 3, there's a chance that we'll have 1 that will turn into something that is somewhat successful. And while that sounds very mundane, somewhat successful can be a 1, 2, 3x return, and that's okay, right? That's actually really augmenting our business. And then, of course, there's always the chance that we're going to come up with a version of AWS, and it is a blockbuster hit that's going to completely change our business. It's always out there. That's always a possibility, but it doesn't have to be the outcome. And that's part of what's important in this point. So lots of ideas. We talked about the process of going through those ideas has to include testing. That's how we move from 10 to 3 to 1, is that we tested those ideas. And so this is the 4th concept that we really want to emphasize, is that all ideas must be tested. We already talked about how complex it is to move from an early stage idea into an actual part of our core business. And there's a lot of complexity in there, and there's a lot of risk, right? So in the early stages, what we always want to do is be able to drive that risk down as we're investing, right? So in the very early stages, of course, that's where our risk is the highest. And this is where we want to keep our investment to the absolute lowest. So if we think about the way we test in the early stage, we want to do fast tests that are really cheap. We want to make sure that we understand what are the most critical assumptions, like what are the deal breakers of these business models that we've started to map out. Let's extract those out first. Let's find the cheapest, fastest way to test those and be really honest with ourselves about the outcome. And so to do that, we really want to amplify the types of experiments we want to address. We don't have time today to really get into the details. Would love to come back and talk more about the testing process. It's a fascinating part of it, and it is so critically important. And then over time, as we start to de-risk these ideas, that's when we can start to look at some of the less critical but still incredibly important elements of the business model and test those and continue to increase the investment we make, because our confidence, of course, is going up as the risk goes down. So quick summary, all of this being lightning quick today, just as we're introducing a lot of concepts. We started with talking about the importance of a portfolio management approach. So that's the balanced approach when we think about the ambidextrous organization, one that is able to think about how to exploit current business models, at the same time explore net new business models. The notion of 3 types of innovation, such an important framing. Lots of ideas, and we need to test those ideas. So those are the 4 key concepts that I wanted to introduce today. Now I'd like to transition into talking a little bit about the process. So how do we take those ideas and turn them into something that we can actually execute on within our workspace? It's something we call the design test loop. It really begins with taking the business model and doing a business model design, right? And of course, everything starts with an idea. Mark, you talked about how you are also going to help in terms of the ideation phase. Everybody's got ideas. This is one thing we find. We talk to organizations all the time. There's no shortage of ideas. Then those ideas turn into a back of the napkin, right? So quick prototype, nothing built, just an idea, right? Just sketched it out. And then we assess it. Now, here's a really critical inflection point, because the way that we assess business models, this is where it can make or break it for you, right? So if it's a group of people in a very insular environment saying, hey, this is a good idea, let's go do this, that can go badly if we don't test it, right? So we've already talked about that. So, but it happens more often than not that organizations will take that idea, agree that they can do it. Why? Because they know they can do it. This is something that they're really good at. And so the feasibility, so the way to execute on it is very clear. And so the confidence is high. They make a decision and they go straight out into the market. Let me share one pretty sort of enormous example. Quibi is a great example, quite recent, if for those of you that are familiar. So a streaming service that had brought in tons of money and huge names to launch this thing that was supposed to really take Netflix to task. Well, as many of you likely know, this lost $1.4 billion in investor money, is completely shut down. And why? Same reason as it always happens, is these guys didn't test, right? All they did was say, we have an idea, let's take it, we believe it to be true, let's go and run it out there and put a ton of money and create a lot of excitement about it because we've got the right names behind it. And so we're going to use the transitive property of that credibility. But what they should have done is they should have stopped and extracted the assumptions they were making about this new business model, created some hypotheses out of that, and then tested those hypotheses, learned from those tests, created actual evidence, and then perhaps go back and loop a number of times. And we always say, you know, you loop as many times as you need back to the drawing board. It's not a linear process, of course, right? We try to sort of describe it as such, but you can be all over the place in this as long as your confidence is going up through evidence, not opinion, before the final decision is made to execute, right? And take this business model to market. So that is the frame. What I want to start talking about now is the tools that we use in the very first stage. Again, we don't have enough time to talk about the whole loop, but I want to talk about business design. And here's where we get to introducing the tools that we use in this process. And I'm going to start with the business model canvas. So for those of you who haven't seen the business model canvas, here it is. There are 9 building blocks that are represented here, and those building blocks work together. So it's not a checklist. It's not something we just go through and just fill in for the sake of it. We need to understand how each one of those pieces work together. So I'm going to try to illustrate that a little bit using this. So we tend to start in the middle. We don't have to. I want to stress that. It's not, when we think about a business model, we don't have to start with the value proposition, but it's almost always the case. So in the middle, we find the value proposition. What is it that we're bringing to the market? Then we typically go next to the market. Who is our customer segment, right? So who are the people that we're selling to? What do they look like? What are the customer profiles? And we're going to spend some more time in these 2 segments. Then we tend to talk about, well, how are we bringing that value through the channel? And then how are we showing them the love? Like, what is the customer relationship process that we have in place, and how do we sustain that? And then, of course, underpinning all of that critical element, how do we make money, right? So where does the revenue come from this element? So we're taking this value, we're bringing it out to the market, we're sustaining that market through customer relationship. How are we making money? So that's part of the story. Then we look at the back end of it, right? Now we're talking about what are the key activities? What is it that we need to do to execute on this business model? And then what are the key resources that we have, right? So this can include everything from actual physical resources to IP, to brands, right? All of those things are critically important when we think about resources. What are the partnerships that we need to consider to really sustain and augment this business model? And then, of course, on that side, we're talking about costs, right? So this is how it all comes together. These are the 9 building blocks of the business model canvas. Now, I want to zero in on a little bit of an additional perspective. I want to layer on top a view to start kind of really illustrating that point of how this needs to work together, right? If it's not working together, then we're not getting the full value of the business model canvas. Again, tends to start with the value proposition, which impacts all sides of the business model. When we think about the customer relationships, the channels that we're using to bring to the customer segment. This is, if we think about a theater metaphor, the front stage. This is what everybody sees. This is what we're bringing to the market and the experience that our customers are having. So we call that the front stage. Then in this, we're able to identify what IDEO classifies as one of the 4 innovation risks, which is desirability. So what's happening here is we're thinking about, why do people want it? And so that's always important, right? It never ends in terms of an important topic. But when we're looking at net new business models, this becomes the very first place that we want to test is, do people even want this? Quibi should have asked that question, right? They should have asked that en masse. Do people want this? They would have gotten a resounding no and saved themselves $1.5 billion, right? So this is where it starts, is in the front stage around testing these ideas. Then we think about the backstage, and here's often the trap, because from a feasibility perspective, this is where those experiences I was talking about earlier, where we're sitting in a confined room and we say, well, this is something we can do. We know we can do it because we're already in the business. We know how to do the thing, those key activities. We know what resources we have. We've already established our partnerships. Or if that's not the case, if it's a brand new idea, well, then we need to explore those, right? Is this even feasible? So now we know the market wants it. Can we do it? We don't know, right? It can be either way. It really depends on the newness of this business model. And now we think about those 3 types of innovation. Where is this landing? Is it on efficiency, is sustaining, or is it transformative, right? So changes the relevance of those questions. Now, of course, underpinning all of this is, will this thing make money, right? What's the profit formula? Very, very simple. Do we make more money than it costs? And that informs our viability. Now, there is a 4th dimension that we bring into this conversation, and that's adaptability. What's the environment in which this business model is intended to live? And does the environment as it stands today work? Does the timing work, right? So there's 4 different dimensions that we can bring into this conversation and layer it on top of the business model. So we think about key trends. What's happening in the market today? What might be changing? What's going on with regulatory changes? What's happening from a cultural or societal perspective? So is there some form of shift? And we think about what's happening in the world today, there's all kinds of those examples for sure, where a particular service or product, just through a societal sort of a values perspective, has shifted, and now suddenly it's no longer a viable product. People don't want it anymore, they don't believe in it anymore, or the reverse can happen, right? A product becomes amplified as a result of something that's happening on a global scale. And then, of course, technology is a huge element of that, always coming into bear. What's happening on the front stage in terms of our customer? Like, our customer segment is shifting, the way in which they buy. I've sold into HR for the predominance of my career, and I saw an enormous shift in terms of the buyer, because HR, from when I started a number of years ago, it was very different in the way that they were appreciated in a business format. By the end, it was a whole different conversation. So an example of how the customer itself just shifted over time, even though the deliverables didn't really change. What's happening in the back end, right? In terms of competitors and how aware are we? Like, do we have an eye in the rearview mirror? And then underpinning that, what are the macroeconomic forces? And again, in today's world, we see so many examples of that from an economy perspective, from a resources perspective. So lots of potential applicability. In fact, Tim, I'm wondering if maybe thinking about it from the world of print, is there anything that stands out for you that kind of would be relevant in some of these factors?
Well, absolutely, and I think it absolutely resonates with the commercial print industry today, particularly in view of the impact that the industry has faced and experienced with COVID, and the need to be able to change business direction, business strategy, and indeed business thinking to add value to their end users. And if we consider some of the market forces that are occurring today in the UK, they're very different, and they are driven and impacted by COVID. And if we look particularly at the retail sector, that is changing and is changing through lockdown and is changing through the impact of COVID, we've seen an experience that particularly the retail sector has had different requirements and has had to respond very, very quickly. So in turn, when they're using print as a method to communicate, the print service providers need to be able to be a lot more agile and responsive in meeting those requirements. So it absolutely resonates in terms of what's happening within the commercial print sector in the UK today.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much for that. I mean, and it really, we do have, there's always so many examples that are applicable. And then of course we have this huge one that just sort of sits in the middle of everything that we're talking about today and kind of touches every element. So thank you so much for that, Tim. Greatly appreciated. And certainly, hopefully triggering some thoughts within the audience, and certainly something that we can explore further down the road and talk about. So all of this is put in place in terms of the business model canvas to tell that story, right? So all of those different factors come together so that we better understand how do we create value for ourselves and how do we create value for our customer. So when Alex and Eve and the team put this tool together many years ago, this was the way that it was intended to work. You could map out, your existing business model, dual-sided business models, which is kind of represented here through the color stickies. It's a bit of a nuanced piece. But then as they went out and talked to their customers and were looking at the way they were using the tool, they realized that the reality was that customers were over-indexing on the value proposition and the customer segment. Makes sense, right? Because there's so much complexity in those two elements, and there's so much of the story that is captured in there, right? Not to minimize the rest of it, but here's where we're really touching people with our products. And so this is where it really got amplified. So this led Alex and Eve and the team to think, well, we need to focus on something over and above. Let's really get into the value proposition. Let's talk about how do we zoom in here. And then the result was the value proposition canvas. And this gives us the ability to take a deep dive look at the customer profile. Who is it that we're selling to? And what are we selling to them? How do we square the two? How do we bring the value into that customer profile, and exploring for that fit, right? This is the same as product market fit. This is a way to really capture this and really understand it at an in-depth level so that we can deliver that with excellence, and we can also evolve it over time as we understand our customer profile even better. So let me spend a couple of minutes just introducing the value proposition canvas, and then after this, Mark and Tim and I are going to go through an actual value proposition canvas, and we'll do that live with you guys. So it starts with customer jobs. What is it that the customer is hiring your product to do or service, right? What is it that they're ultimately trying to get done? And this is a really interesting part of it, because the tendency in the beginning is to just look at functions in this. But it goes way beyond that. It's really like, what is the real thing? What is the real reason that someone is buying your product? Because once you start to really unravel that, you can go a whole different direction in terms of how you deliver that the actual value back to those jobs. It doesn't change the product or service necessarily, but it might change the narrative. It might change the way that you present that. So it starts with customer jobs. Then we think about pains, really straightforward. We always talk about what's the risk. Risk is always the word that comes out probably more than any when people think about pain, and then just things that we're trying to avoid. Then we move to gains, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be this linear, but typically this is also the flow. Gains aren't necessarily the opposite of pains, and this is where gains can get a little bit tricky to really wrap our minds around. They can be things that are over and above what we're solving by bringing this product to address the jobs and the pains. It can also be things like delighters. And I've got an example to try to help illustrate the difference between pains and gains. Now let's shift to the value map. So what is it that we're bringing? We start with just our products and services, right? We map those out. And then how do those products and services specifically meet the requirements of the customer and relieve the pains that they have, and then ideally create the gains that they're either hoping for or may not even be aware of, right? So that's the way those two come together. I have a couple examples just to help illustrate, hopefully. So a credit card, everybody knows the job to be done, right? It's pretty straightforward. You put it down and pay for something. A pain might be that it doesn't work on a date or a business meeting or whatever is more relevant, right? That would be a pain. So the instinct is to say, well, then a gain is that it works. Well, not really, because we introduced this idea of the expectations part, right? Like we expect our credit card to work when we use it. It shouldn't be a gain. We're not thrilled when it works. It just works, right? We don't even notice typically. But a gain might be that you get points. So every time you use a credit card, you gain something over and above. This would be a particularly relevant gain if the date was bad or you didn't get the deal from the business meeting or whatever the case may be. Another example is, and then we're going to move into a live example with Mark, is so you're lined up at Starbucks, you're you know what you're getting, so it's pretty easy, the customer job. Although it can be interesting to really explore what is the job to be done when you're going for a coffee. It's not necessarily as straightforward. So a pain for sure would be a long wait, right? 10 minutes. Let's say 5 minutes lands on the expectations bar, right? So you're happy if you wait for 5 minutes to get the coffee, but you're really happy if it's 2 minutes. And the reason why I bring this example in, because this is really obvious, is if you got cold coffee, that would be a pain, right? If you got hot coffee, let's put that on the expectations bar. But the point of this next point is that to really illustrate that it's not polar opposite. It's not the further you get away from the pain, does it become more and more a gain? Because if you think about it, if you got really hot coffee, which is the opposite of really cold coffee, that's also not a gain, right? That would actually be a pain. You'd have to wait, you might even burn yourself, right? So it's actually a pain. So this just to help sort of illustrate that it can be super nuanced when we're thinking about gains. So with all of that in mind, and now with a lightning quick introduction to these tools, I'd like to transition us back over to you, Mark. Actually, I think I'm going to continue driving here, but
yeah,
we take this time now to open up the platform and bring in an actual live value proposition canvas that Mark has worked on to start to introduce what that looks like in your space. And so we'll go through and we'll reveal the different elements of both the customer profile and then the value map. And again, we'll frame it here by understanding the customer jobs, the pains, the gains, and we'll explore it as we go. So looks like we're good to go.
Yeah, we're good to go. Thanks, Andy.
We want to take just a minute, just one, not even like 30 seconds, just to introduce the customer profile. Who is it that we're looking at here? And then we'll start to reveal the details.
Okay, so when we've done this, we thought about the world of print clearly, and we thought about who a particular customer could be for a commercial printer. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the retail now, because retail has been affected positively and negatively. Obviously positively for food shops and for home deliveries, etc., but negatively for shops that are closed at the moment, potentially because of COVID conditions. So what we want to do is we want to walk you through how we profiled that retail customer, and then the pains and gains that they could potentially be experiencing. You know, what does success and failure look like? And then we're going to relate it back then to a potential service or a service that maybe some of you are already offering, and then how the fit works. You know, how that does the offering or the value proposition then fit in to overcome, you know, the failures or pains that customers got, and then, you know, how does it match to success? So, Andy, over to you, and then I guess we can do a little bit of a reveal set on this session as well.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get into the first job. Let's start with the job. So we've got one here, creating a strong brand that consumers can. I'm assuming, yeah.
Yep, can see it. Yep.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
I guess here, where the print element that comes into this is print is all about supporting that brand. You know, we're going to promote it in various ways, and we'll come on to it in a minute. One of the ideas, you know, that potentially can be exploited. Okay, next one, Andy.
Perfect. So creating a strong brand, critical job to be done. Next one.
So what we've got here, yeah, complying with any local laws and regulations. Now, clearly, if it's a, you know, food safety certificates and food has to be managed in a particular way, but it's also around compliance, and every retail business that's out there has probably got some form of regulatory compliance that they need to get to manage. Okay.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So talking about the customer base.
Yeah, this is key. This is clearly key for everybody. You know, keeping your customers, winning them is a lot harder than keeping them. Let's put it that way. There's a lot more effort that goes into actually keeping a customer, but you know, getting a customer. So we've got to make sure that we manage that process effectively.
Yeah, great. And then next one, we bring one in that comes from that sort of a value chain that we were talking about with adaptability, thinking about the threats coming from competitors.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then we talk about variability, right? So changing needs. What exists today with consumers may not be the same case later. Is that the?
Exactly, because if you're not, if the customer's needs change and you're not supplying products or services to meet those customer needs, then you're going to come under threat potentially from a competitor that's offering those products and services. Yeah.
Yeah. This has got to be a huge one.
Well, it is the environmental issue. We hear about this all the time, and the impact of CO2 and climate change and all that sort of stuff. So again, that's going to probably be applicable to virtually every single business that's out there right now.
No doubt. So
okay, own brand products. Now, if you look at it from retail, and a lot of stores, a lot of people are doing this now. They're taking a product and putting their own brand on it. Why do they do that? Clear, because they want to differentiate themselves from their competitors. But also, own brand products could potentially be providing a higher return on investment than perhaps ones that they have to buy in from a supply chain. Okay, next one.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. And we've got one last one here. And so managing the seasonal demands.
Yeah, exactly. In retail, the seasons, and at the moment, I think the seasons are all a little bit mixed up. Shops opening, closing. Consumers having access to clothing, for instance. If the shops are shut and they can't get in there, then that seasonal demand is going to really impact on the supply chain. Okay,
makes a lot of sense. So customer jobs, we've gone through those really quickly. We're not going to do it today because we don't have time, but what would be interesting to do is to then stack rank these. Like what would we prioritize as the most important jobs to be done? The other thing that we can do with an audience, again, perhaps at a different time, is start to ask, or you do this with your customer. This is one of the most powerful things to do, is you bring this out to your customer and you say, so here's what I think your jobs to be done are. What would you add? What would you take away from here? Where am I wrong? And then, of course, ask them to stack rank it. So it's a really, interesting way to do this. Let's move into talking about the pains. I'm just going to slide this up a little bit. So lack of demand.
Exactly. Yeah. If people don't want your product and service, you're not selling anything. Yeah. Exactly.
No kidding. Yeah, so that's pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
So sustainability goals, that's
exactly.
right into right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's get this next one to open. Oh, this is an interesting one. Yeah, so external factors outside of our control. That's got to be always a huge risk.
Yeah, and very, very relevant right now. Very relevant.
Yeah, right. Nobody saw this coming, and certainly not to this degree. So it's all about that. In fact, that one really speaks to the whole concepts of creating resilience and becoming invincible, right? That's the idea around that, is you can never control what happens externally, but you can only control, of course, how we respond, right? So, that is a really excellent point. The supply chain issues.
Supply chain lets us down. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes sense. And then I guess all of that results into revenue profit decline and directly correlates to loss of customers. So it's almost like that's just a bit of a linear story there, yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So so some great pains that you've captured there, and hopefully these are resonating with those on the call. Hopefully that isn't happening for everybody, but in terms of where the risk is, or perhaps what has been experienced, that stands out. So some of the potential gains.
Position against competition. Yeah,
that definitely, in terms of increasing and strengthening that position. Of course, increasing revenue and profit. Now, this does show up immediately as a counterpoint to the pain. And thinking back to my earlier comments, it for sure does. I mean, we put gains in here that do sort of oppose the pains. It's not like it can never do that. That's part of it. It just then the opportunity to expand on the gain conversation is definitely something that can be tricky to do, but we can explore. So now the next one you've got so brand recognition, right?
Yep.
That's for sure. And then without a doubt, sustainability is huge, and then growing customers, right? So all of these for sure would be received as gains. Okay, so now we've got a view, and I don't know if maybe you can you zoom out? I can't seem to.
Bear with me a second.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
Yeah, I'm gonna go down to here. Okay, this one.
yeah. But,
The joys of doing it live, Andy? Yeah,
that's all right.
okay. Yeah. Hold on, I just need to move the control panels over a little bit. Let me just to zoom.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Beautiful. Perfect. We got there. Yeah, we can never make it happen without some technical issues, right? That's okay. All right. So now now I don't know if we can actually zoom back in a little bit, but
Okay.
let's start.
So
Yeah, that's perfect. That's good. Let's start by looking at the products and services themselves. So here's where we start to square what it is that we're going to do to address the pains and the jobs, pains, and gains. So let me ask you to walk us through these products, Mark. So I think it all comes down to this, right? This, the marketing automation factor,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
That's
Exactly.
what it is.
So what we've got is, yeah, we've taken a product and a service that we believe would help.
Oh, I think we.
What we're going to do now is link back the product or service that could be offered in a logical way to show everybody here how, by understanding your customer and the customer's touch points, the failures and the success, how marketing automation and cross media could potentially add a benefit or a value, let's put it that way, to that customer's business. So should we start with the pain relievers first of all, Andy, down the bottom, and it's just I guess we go down there and see how they work. So have you got control?
I do. Did you? So we could go straight to pain relievers. Did you want to expand just on in terms of the products and services that we're delivering?
Let's do that. Yeah, no problem at all. So, okay.
What we find that happens is when we start by getting clear on what it is that we're delivering to the customers, then it's from there that we can frame how are we relieving the pains and how are we creating the gains, right? So I think as extensions of that core marketing automation function, we bring in reporting tools, direct mail, and then the e-commerce platform. Anything else that you would say around that or build out on that in terms of solution?
I think clearly we didn't put email in there, we didn't put landing page and all that, but that goes, I guess, naturally with marketing automation, reporting, data cleansing, all the various elements that you would necessarily consider when you're putting together a full approach back to a customer. The targeting of their customers, the data that's held, all the security issues that go with it. But we wanted today just to give, I guess, a couple of light touch points just to show how simple and effective this approach can be to understanding the customer and then designing the value products that you would offer back to them. Yeah,
perfect. Okay, fantastic. And I'm confident that everyone on the call or perhaps looking at the recording afterwards are this resonates, right? This is very familiar with this group of products. So now, yeah, let's definitely move to the pain relievers and let's talk about how these solutions are going to address some of the pains and maybe even the jobs to be done.
Yep. So let's put it up from an optimized supply channel. Communication is not only to customers, it's to suppliers as well. So by having some form of marketing automation, if anything happens, we can quickly communicate both internally, externally. So having that is going to be absolutely key.
Fantastic. Then, so e-commerce, what were you looking to say? Yeah.
So with marketing automation, let's put it this way: if a shop closes, we need to communicate that we're open for business. So we've got to quickly launch a campaign, and we can do that with direct mail, which we obviously highlighted here. But we can also use it with email and a combination of all of the approaches put together. So making sure that business continuity continues is absolutely essential.
Yeah. For sure, it makes a lot of sense. And so one of the things that we want to do as we're going through this process, and we probably won't have time to do it all the way through, but we want to relate the pain reliever back to either a pain we identified or potentially a job to be done that we had established as well. So if you think about some of these pain relievers as we go through them, it might be good just to indicate where would we tie that back. And I think the next one gives us a pretty straight shot, right? So sustainable packaging. We talked about sustainability a few times.
Yep, absolutely. So But having goods and services which meet those environmental conditions that are out there, the sustainable element, recycling, all those sorts of things that are absolutely key right now. And I think what we're trying to highlight to everybody that's on the call this afternoon is that what we're showing is a process here. And for print salespeople, understanding their customers is going to be essential. So we're moving from, effectively, as I said, from farmer to hunter. And the tools that we're showing now and this process can allow us to profile customers. And once we profile customers and we understand what their pain points are and what the gains they're looking for, it allows us to design effectively goods and services that relieve those pains and offer them a higher degree of success. And that's realistically what we're showing this afternoon in a very simplified way, I have to say.
Well, and Mark, I think you really nailed on a point there, because the whole point of this is to be simple, right? I mean, there's a lot of complexity when we get into the detail, because we're having this in a presentation type of format. But if we were doing this with a customer and we're really developing a product and we were in that process, we would be getting into a lot of detail within each one of these steps. We wouldn't necessarily be capturing it on these tools. We wouldn't need to. The point is that these tools are really designed to help drive that conversation and then capture that thinking. And so I've just made some connections here, right? So connecting this sustainable packaging back to a pain, and then as well as a gain, and actually we had a little bit of lag time, but I could probably connect that back to a job to be done. It's a little bit cut off from where I am. Also want to illustrate the fact that it's not linear, right? And I said, well, a pain reliever has to connect to a pain. It's actually can oftentimes shoot out to all different types of elements within the customer profile. So then the last two that we've got in terms of pain relievers, in-store promotions, and then logistics. Anything to add on top of that?
I think for time's sake, I think what we're trying to do is highlight that the more we understand about our customers, the more we can then develop a strategy that allows us to sell products and services to that customer. And one of the things that we're encouraging, and we're doing this now with a few customers that are in the EDGE program, is actually working with their customer. So we're bringing their customer in, because the platform is effectively a collaboration platform. You're seeing it live. Andy's is in Canada. I'm here in Europe. So it allows us to remotely work with our customers to start to design those products and services and act, as organizations that can help overcome potential issues that they may have right now. And that's the key strength that we found working with Strategyzer and the tools and the process, that it allows us to quickly mobilize and develop those strategies that are essential right now to generating revenue and cash.
Yeah. Excellent, well said. So I just went ahead and uncovered the gain creators. Again, to your point, we are running a little bit short on time. I don't know that we can go through each one of them. Feels like we've introduced some of the concepts. So why don't we switch it back then? I'll switch it back to you, Mark, and then I think next steps from there.
Okay, no problem at all. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen, bringing it back to us live in here. And I think if you want to join as well, and then we can do the wrap up. One thing I want to do, and this isn't a plug for Strategyzer books, let me put it that way, but part of the whole program that we're doing is our whole range of tools and support that's available from Rico and from Strategyzer. But one of the things that Strategyzer have done, which we can also give to our customers that come into this program to support them, is the actual books. So I've got some here, and it basically gives advice in a very, very easy way to consume and understand, that supports the whole program. And there's one on business models, there's one on value proposition design that's here, there's testing business ideas, and then the Invincible Company, and then the last one, which is I think the recent one, Andy, that's just come out, is the high impact for teams. If I put that there now. Every customer that comes into the EDGE program is going to get those books as well. That's our investment back into our customers. So as you come into it, and we work with the tools and we help you to design it, and then get you onto the platform as well, so that you can start collaborating with your customers, you're going to get all of that as well. And I think one thing we should also talk about, Andy, is that on the Strategyzer platform, there is a whole set of training that people get on how to go through this process and design the business models and the value propositions as well. So I think for time's sake, we should move then to perhaps some Q&A, and back to you, Tim, as well.
Yeah, well, Andy, Mark, thanks for sharing that fantastic content this afternoon. For me, I think the content that you shared was fabulous, and there's some great ideas in terms of being able to create new ideas and being able to implement as part of a future business strategy. And I think with everything that's happening around us in society, in business, in the economy, and within the commercial print sector, I think there's no better time to give this serious consideration. We genuinely want to help you innovate, add value, and differentiate. And as I said just previously, I think there's no better time now, given the fact that COVID has had to really force us to think about what's going to happen in the future. There's no better time now to consider re-engineering your business strategy so that you're able to create effective print that's relevant for the new normal that lies ahead, whatever that might be. And it's very clear, and I just want to re-emphasize and reiterate that we genuinely want to help you bring those business ideas to life. I think what we've been able to showcase very briefly is that we've got the expertise, we've got the methodologies, and we've now in the UK got some great case studies that will validate that. So we genuinely do encourage you to make contact so that we can engage and support and start to roll out these really exciting programs. I think it's also important to state that the extensive innovation and development programs at RICO will not only support your short-term business strategies and goals, but also the longer-term opportunities to produce and create print that stand out, provide differentiation, and drive real value to your customers. And remember to let us know in your comments if you'd like to be considered for the free of charge consultancy program. And one of my team will be in touch and follow up shortly. So let's now move over to the questions. We have a couple of questions that have been submitted through the last hour. So let me just look at those. So the first question we've got, maybe a degree of cynicism here, but we can certainly provide a response to it. So the question is this not just a Me Too program offered by all main digital vendors? Well, if I can just maybe respond to that first, because I do have experience of other programs that are available from our competition.
Me too.
What I can clearly say is that the program that we've developed, and I'll ask Mark and Andy to comment, the program that we've developed is far more meaningful and far more relevant in terms of being able to help and create those programs and support infrastructures. And it's designed, it genuinely is designed as a practical guide to help you on this journey of discovery and business re-engineering for the future. So we genuinely feel that whilst, yes, there are other programs available, the impact that we are getting and the impact, most importantly, that we're providing to our customers, I think is a key differentiator. Mark, what would you say to that?
Well, the way I would respond to that, Tim, is the fact that we've got customers that have gone through this, completely modeled their business, and Andy's been instrumental in helping with some of these customers as well to launch complete new businesses in, for instance, into direct-to-garment T-shirt printing, where they're getting orders. I can remember a couple of customers right at the very beginning of the process getting orders coming in of around 2,500–3,000 euros before they've even launched their e-commerce platform, because the sales guys just capitalized on it, spoke to a couple of customers where you're interested, and instantly the orders started coming in. And now that order bank is growing and growing and growing. So is this a Me Too program? No, it's not. It's completely designed on an individual basis because we understand exactly the requirements that our customers need and how to engineer that to meet the changing market conditions that we're faced with right now.
Fantastic. No, I agree, absolutely. So in the interest of time, we'll move on to the next question. How long does this take and how much commitment is required? So Mark, could I ask you to start and then perhaps Andy?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think, let me start this. when people come into this program, it shouldn't just be, we'll just do this and then we'll leave it alone. It's got to be a continuation. You know, you've really got to be focused on making sure that you're testing and keeping your business models updated. Now, that takes from a management team investment, but the investment pays off because you're constantly testing, is your business strong enough? And as they say in the book, invincible. Now, from an initial point of view, we run these sessions in 2 hours. So we look at doing 2-hour sessions, and we typically around 5 to 6 sessions, first of all, to start off with. And that will give us a very, very good indication on what we need to do and how we need to plan the next steps. From that, we'll put together a plan, and then it's down to the customer then to, you know, decide, do we carry on or do we hit the pause button? But I think most customers, once they get into this, realize the power and the strength of it and carry on. But I'd be interested from Andy's point of view, because Andy sees more than just the print industry. Let's put it this way, it's a process design, 5 million customers using their platform and their process. So I think it must be pretty successful. Let's put it that way. Andy.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, Mark. And so when we think about developing an ecosystem for innovation, exactly as you said, it's not a one-time thing. It really becomes a culture. It's a way of working. And so to develop a culture of innovation, it requires the embedding of some of these notions, right? So we didn't get into the detail of the different dimensions when you think about shifting explore and exploit. What needs to change in terms of thought process and mindset when you think about that? So we spend a lot of time working with organizations to help them, you know, sort of adopt their mindset or adapt their mindset, change it a little bit to align with this. In terms of actual execution, you know, the learning of the tools and then the application of those tools. Yeah, we have a lot of different solutions ranging from the book. There's a ton of free services online just to, you know, download that. Of course, we do provide, you know, some training and so on. But when we do think about testing, here's where we really encourage organizations to consider that those processes run a little bit longer. So, you know, a number of weeks, because we want to make sure that you're really getting out there and testing that idea. So kind of a range of answers, but I'm with you to say that once you start down this track, it just becomes a new way of working rather than just a one-time thing.
Okay, thanks, guys. I'm conscious of time. There is. We do have a couple of other questions which we will certainly respond after the end of the live event. But there's one other question that I'd like to ask. This sounds pretty sophisticated. I'm only a relatively small business with 10 employees, so is it still applicable to me? Again, Mark, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll start that, and then again, Andy's experience as well. From my experience of working this, and I have already run sessions with smaller print companies, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 employees. The process can support everybody, and it's not sophisticated, because what we do is we start in the discovery session asking, you know, what are the issues that you're faced with and how do you want to address those issues? What are your objectives? And then from that, we then start to build out a plan. And that plan can be very simple yet effective. So it's not a complicated process at all.
Yeah, you know, everything we do, Alex is always really adamant to say that if it's not simple, then there's no point, right? If people can't use it and apply it, then it's just a philosophy, it's an idea that is kind of a waste of time. And so the applicability is really needs to be clear and strong. The concepts, really, even just in this conversation that we've had, this can be enough for people to really manage and obviously consume that concept. It's not a hard concept to grasp. Where we find that it takes longer and longer is when we're the opposite of the person who's asking the question, is when it's an enormous organization, because to shift the culture and a mindset in a huge organization from exploit to explore, that takes a lot of work. But the concepts are easily understood and then quickly move to just using the tools. Let's just execute. Let's just go through this discovery stage, let's ideate, let's get some ideas, and let's go out there and start to test. So that's it, that's the frame, right? Then there's a lot of nuance in terms of how you do it. But the concepts are really just that simple, right? Creating that balance, understanding it, and then getting into the process of testing ideas. I mean, that's really at the end of the day what we're trying to really evangelize.
Right, thank you. Yep. So in the interest of time, I think we do have a couple of other questions, but we will respond to those later via email. So firstly, again, Andy, Mark, thank you for participating and sharing the content today. I think it's fabulous. And thank you for all of those people who've taken time out to attend today's webinar. We hope we've inspired you with some of the ideas and thoughts that we've shared. And we genuinely are very excited, and we are poised to help you on this journey and road of discovery that certainly we're all going to need to go on to ensure that our business models are successful for the future. So thanks very much. Have a good rest of the day, and most of all, please stay safe. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.